Hi viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we are talking about folk magic. I'm recording this week's video on Sunday because I'm going to be really busy this week touring around with my show that I'm doing for my senior project. This week is my college's spring break, and I say spring break even though there is snow all over the ground right now. It keeps snowing on and off, but in any case I'm going to be really busy, so I'm doing this video ahead of time before I watch any of the others. It's going to be pretty quick and kind of vague, though. I could probably go into a lot more depth if I knew more about this topic. So we're talking about folk magic. The question was from WiccanMan16, who asked, could you talk about folk magic, maybe some examples and how it came and just the background? So folk magic. Folk magic refers to the magical tradition of any one group of people, the magic of a folk. Surprisingly, if you Google folk magic, I used to get definitions, but now it just gives me folk religion, which refers to religious customs under the umbrella of an organized religion, but that fall outside of the usual orthodoxy or orthopraxy. That's my paraphrase of what the Wikipedia definition was. What I mean when I talk about folk magic is a group of magical practices that are defined in opposition to either ceremonial magic or celestial magic. So anything that is not ceremonial or celestial is folk to me. That's how I define it. If ceremonial magic refers to the kind of magic that people do in ritual during ceremony and the types of things that are reserved only for that format, and celestial magic refers to magic that connects a deity and a person, then folk magic is what remains. The simplistic, the sympathetic, the earthy, and all other types of things that we may do. Some examples that I could come up with of things that I consider folk magic at first glance would be things like witch bottles, herbal magic, puppets, lucky charms, purely elemental magic, some petition magic if it's purely elemental, which is how I work with it. Anything where you are using the components of a spell purely for the sake of that component. This is not to say that these things can't be used as ceremonial or celestial magic, because they can. Like, the way I would differentiate that is I might, if I'm doing a spell to calm, I might use lavender in it because lavender itself is used for calming. On the other hand, if I'm doing a ritual or a spell working with some deity, which would then be celestial magic, I could use that same herb, but the reason would be because it is sacred to that deity, which takes it from being using the component for the component's own means and turning it into using the component because it is sacred to deity or because it has a ritual significance. That's the difference for me. We can combine different forms of magic all we want. You can use folk magic in a ritual. It's just, I think, for me, it's the difference between, like, I only cast a circle when I'm doing ritual. So casting a circle for me is a form of ceremonial magic because it has to do with the ceremony and the ritual. Casting a circle has nothing to do with anything other than ritual for me, so I wouldn't call that folk magic because it is specifically for ritual. I suppose that one could argue that casting a circle is about connection to deity because you're creating the space where you are going to connect to deity, but I wouldn't call it that because it's not the direct relationship for me, at least. I hope this is making sense to you. So to me, things that are folk magic are things that are not purely for ritual and things that are not directly related to relating to deity. Okay, so that's where I got my little list of things like witch bottles and herbal magic and stuff like that. I can't really give you the background of folk magic because it depends on the group of people that you're talking about. It depends on the folk, and I didn't grow up with any one group of them. I grew up around a lot of Native American spirituality, so I guess a good example from what I do know would be Native American spirituality in general can use folk magic for ceremonial purposes because you can use things like medicine bags, dream catchers, mandalas, I don't know how you really pronounce that. I kind of interchange it which way I pronounce it on which day. But you can use those elements of folk magic for ceremonial purposes, and I do. So that to me would be a good combination of something that is folk magic being used for a ritual purpose. But that's really as far as I can get into it because I think mostly what I do is folk magic by that definition that I've been talking about this whole time, like simple little spells with crystals and herbs and flowers and twigs and things like that. I would call that folk magic because even though I am using them to connect to deity and my overall envisionment of the universal energy, there's a difference for me between using a stick because it's a certain type of wood from the earth and using a stick because it is representative of God. This video sounds like a bunch of mumbling, I'm sure. Or like sometimes, if I want to do a spell with stones, I might get 2 different color stones because I want one to represent the god and one to represent the goddess, in which case I'm connecting it to deity and that would be celestial for me. Or if I'm just using them because the color evokes a certain sensation in people, it has nothing to do with the ceremony, it has nothing to do with deity. I mean, it always does because it's all connected, but you know what I mean. It doesn't have that direct, this is because it represents this deity, then I would call that folk magic. I think I'm just rambling at this point. I hope that I conveyed how I understand those 3 forms to be different. And I did at one point think that maybe it might be interesting for us to talk about all 3 different kinds of magic on this channel, like in those 3, like if anyone has heard of those terms being used, because I only heard of celestial magic being defined separately like a year or so ago. And I mean, you always hear about folk magic and you always hear about ceremonial magic or high magic and low magic, but celestial magic was a whole new concept for me. So I thought about putting that into a topic of having us talk about all 3, but I didn't know if it was relevant at all, if enough people had heard of those terms, or if enough of us were familiar with purely ceremonial magic, but now I think we might have a better variation in people's beliefs. It took me a long time to come up with the word variation. I apologize. So maybe this week would be a good time for us to touch on all 3 of those things if possible, or how we do them differently. This video is taking too long. I'm going to go now. I will see you guys next week. Thank you very much for watching. Blessed be. Bye.